Hey, what's up? I'm Seth Warburton, and this is What Movies Teach, the channel where I analyze the direct and indirect lessons in movies, ultimately to decide if it's a movie that I want to share with my kids, and if it's a movie I'm happy watching myself. Okay, I'm really excited today because I'm starting with the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm analyzing those movies from beginning to end in release order, not chronological order because they kind of skipped around as far as time concerned. But I'm starting with Iron Man 1, which is actually just called Iron Man. So we're calling it Iron Man. Okay, Iron Man, the first movie to start the Marvel Cinematic Universe. When I first watched this, I didn't have any kids. And I just remember thinking it was tons of fun. It's definitely a different mindset when I'm watching a movie to analyze the lessons in the movie, what it's trying to teach, what my kids are going to be getting out of it. I know that when my kids watch it, that's not what they're thinking about. They're not thinking about the lessons. But I think it's important to look at the messages being taught and the lessons that this movie is talking about, because our kids are going to get those consciously, unconsciously. They're still going to be there. And so I actually really enjoyed going back, and it made it a little bit of a different experience, but it was still tons of fun. So overall, this movie has a big theme and big lessons, but I'm going to talk about the little ones that come first, that kind of lead up to it. So I'm going to put this out there just so you know. Spoiler alert. The first lesson I learned is to don't stop to text when you're being shot at. Okay, so what we see in this story is that Tony Stark is a funny, charismatic guy. He gets attacked and he's in this really tough situation, but we don't know much more about him until we kind of go back in time. I think it was like 36 hours earlier. It was a very Alias-esque situation where you start from one point in time and then go back to see what happened before. And you see that Tony Stark lives a very pleasure-seeking lifestyle. You see him gambling, drinking. He has a one-night stand with a woman that he just met, and then he completely ignores her after the fact. He doesn't seem to care much about those around him, but just his own situation and what he's doing. And as far as lessons I want my kids to have, obviously, those aren't good ones. But you do understand, so after seeing him in this pleasure-seeking lifestyle, and that you do learn that he is an incredibly intelligent man, and he's built some amazing things. But he really, wastes his life. And so then we go back to where he's at in the present, as it were, where he's stuck in this cave. He's been captured by some, this terrorist organization, I guess, the 10 Rings. But he's captured by these guys. He's in a cave. He was dying, and he's saved by this guy named Jensen. And this guy, Jensen, becomes his mentor and becomes basically his Obi-Wan Kenobi, his guiding light as far as changing his life. Because he realizes in this cave where he's at the lowest point in his life that he needs to make some changes. Jensen says a couple things to him. Tony's really sad. He's like, I'm going to die in a week. And Jensen's like, well, then you better make it a good week. And he talks about how, he's wasted his life. Jensen has his family. And Tony's like, I don't have anybody. And Jensen's like, well, you're the man who has everything and the man who has nothing. And you can see this is really affecting Tony. Obviously, the lifestyle we saw before, was not something that we should strive to have, because he's empty. He's not happy. And honestly, this whole situation he's in right now kind of feels like a consequence of that lifestyle, even though it wasn't directly. In the movie watching it, it's like, well, if you live that kind of life, you're going to end up in a cave. Not maybe that direct, but it kind of feels that way a little bit. So then you see Tony's in this cave. He's at the lowest point in his life, and he decides to start doing something different. He is a problem solver. Actually, he always has been, and that's another lesson you learn throughout this entire movie, is that you do what it takes to solve the problem you're in. And Tony's like, well, I'm going to pretend to make this missile, and instead he builds a suit of armor to break him out of this cave. Unfortunately, Jensen doesn't make it. He sacrifices his life. But before he dies, Tony says, thank you. You saved my life. And Jensen says, don't waste it. A very Saving Private Ryan moment where he's like, don't waste what I've given you. And you can tell this really affects him. So he uses his suit. He breaks out. He pretty much kills everybody there. he blows everything up and takes off, and then he goes back home. Okay, so those are some of the lessons. Now, next you see him get back home, everybody's happy to see him, and immediately he takes action. So that's the next thing that you see. The next thing I kind of pick up from this is he immediately goes to a press conference. He says, we are shutting down all of our weapons manufacturing, and we're going to do something else. He doesn't really specify what the other thing is that they're going to do. I mean, is it going to be charity? Are they going to build hospitals? I mean, hopefully it's something more altruistic. He doesn't quite get into that, but they stopped building weapons. He's really upset with the fact that his weapons, and you see this earlier in the film, have been used by the bad guys, or have been used to create a ton of destruction. That's ultimately his legacy up to this point, is that he creates destruction for people, and he doesn't like that. And so he starts taking action. He starts trying to solve this problem, the problem of his legacy. So then we get into a really fun part of the movie where he's building the suit, and it's hilarious. He has these setbacks where he is building another suit of armor to help him. You know, honestly, you don't really know why he's doing it at this point. Just the fact that he thinks it's really cool and he's using his mind to build something. It's this personal project that he has. There are some fun and funny moments. He tries to get it to work, and he flies himself up into the roof on accident.
3, 2, 1.
His dialogue, I mean, Robert Downey Jr. just delivers this character amazingly. He's talking to his robots, he's talking to his assistant, his partner, his best friend, and his partner and best friend, they are totally upset with him for taking action and for trying to change his life in this situation, because it's bad for them. But he sticks with it, he stays the course, he builds this awesome suit of armor, and it's a good thing he does, because then he learns that his company is actually supplying the weapons to the people who kidnapped him earlier. He had thought that they had stolen them, and in fact, his company is supplying weapons to both the United States and the enemies of the United States. And he's like, what? And nobody's listening to him. They're saying, hey, this is just the way it is, and you got to deal with it. And instead of dealing with it, he takes this new suit of armor, he flies over to this country, he finds out that the hometown of Jensen, this guy who saved him in the cave, is being attacked, and so he flies over there in his suit, and he pretty much just takes everybody out. These are some of the messages, too, that I don't know sit super well with me. He goes over there, and he does save some people that are, I mean, they're being held at gunpoint, but then he just starts taking out everybody. He sees some people with a tank, blows up the tank. I mean, did he know if that was a tank owned by these terrorists? Was that just a tank owned by maybe the local militia? I mean, he doesn't know. He's assuming they're bad, but there's no real due process there, and really not tons of consequence. And you also realize pretty early on in this situation that there's not real danger for Tony. I mean, this suit protects him completely. And so he takes everybody out, and there you go. He saves this town. He goes back home. Everything's pretty good. He did had a little tussle with the U.S. Army when they're trying to figure out what's going on, because, hey, you know, it's not really legal for somebody just to come in and start doing whatever they want. And again, there's no real consequence here to Tony's action, other than that he did save some people, but he did it in a very vigilante way. So as far as a superhero movie story is concerned, that's a lot of fun, right? That's really cool to see. He just takes action, doesn't ask questions, gets in there. As a parent thinking about the messages that his kids are receiving, I'm like, yeah, does that sit well with me now? I don't know. Something to think about. Let me know what you guys think, if you agree with Tony's approach or not. So he comes back, and we realize that Tony's partner the whole time has been the bad guy. I mean, you kind of knew. It's Jeff Bridges. He does a great job. I love Jeff Bridges. But you figure out that he's building his own superpowered suit, and he needs Tony's power source. So Tony, in the cave, had built this power source to save his life. It's called an arc reactor. It's in his chest, and it basically powers magnets that are keeping shards of metal out of his heart. But it also is super powerful. So powerful that it can power his suits, and his suits can shoot lasers, and I think at one point he says it has enough power to stay on for over 50 lifetimes. So really powerful device. The his partner, his name is Obadiah, he can't replicate it. So he comes over, he finally reveals, I'm the bad guy. He steals the power source. Tony's assistant, Pepper, comes and saves his life, thankfully, finds another power source for him. And Tony decides, I'm going to stop this guy. And they have a huge battle in their mechanized suits. Obadiah, he built this new one. It's huge. It's very militarized. Tony's is smaller, and he's kind of looks like the underdog. A lot of civilians get in danger during this fight, but Tony goes out of his way to save them. And we see that, again, Tony's a problem solver. He does whatever it takes to beat this guy. In fact, at the very end, he blows up his own factory just to stop this bad guy because he's a problem solver. That's what you do. So by the end of this movie, you see Tony, he defeated the bad guy. He's trying to change his life, but you also see that he's still on a journey. He hasn't changed a ton as far as personality is concerned. His personality flaws, as it were, his narcissism, doesn't really go away. And so you see that the big theme and the big lesson at the end of this is that he's taking responsibility finally for his life, for his legacy, for his influence, and he's trying to change for the better. He's not there yet. At the very end, he makes a little selfish, self-serving decision because he wants the prestige. He doesn't like somebody else getting that attention, and he wants it.
I am Iron Man.
And so that's more for him, but it's more a lighthearted, funny thing. But you see, overall, he's deciding to change his life. He's taking responsibility. But honestly, you feel like he's at the very beginning of that journey. Because when he was helping people, he was still mostly helping himself. I mean, when he helped that town, that Jensen's hometown, in that other country, he was really trying to stop the guys who had stole his weapons. He was helping some people at the same time, but he didn't go out of his way to help anybody else on the way. And then in the very end, he's stopping, his partner. He's trying to help his company there, but that's still more of a self-serving situation. So, there's hero moments. He does some good things, but it's not like fully altruistic. It's not fully out there helping everybody using this suit to go, protect the city or whatever. Something that you'd see like Batman or Superman do. But that's okay, because you feel like he's just beginning his journey. He's starting that. So that's what I got out of it. Okay, those are the big lessons that I saw in Iron Man. Again, this is a movie that I think is tons of fun. So the final question I'm going to ask is, would I let my kids watch this movie? As far as the theme is concerned, I think the theme is great. To take responsibility for yourself, your legacy, your influence. There are some little content things, though, that I worry about for my kids personally. I know my 12-year-old, she has a hard time with blood, and there some of those gritty in the cave scenes might be a little hard for her. So I would really need to gauge that first. My 10-year-old, there's the scene where he's having his hedonistic, self-serving lifestyle. I just need to make sure, as far as I really didn't like the fact that he has this one-night stand with this lady, and he completely ignores her after the fact. Really does not treat her well. I would need to have some talks with my son, saying, that's not how you treat women, and I hopefully he kind of understands that. There's also the gambling, the drinking. These are just things that I want to make sure going into it that he's aware of the consequences of those things, even though they're not really shown directly in that movie. So would I let my kids watch it? Oh, and my 7 and 5-year-old, they don't really understand those concepts yet. This is a little older situation for them, so I would not have them watch it. My older 2, I would need to do a little bit of reconnaissance first. I would need to really gauge how they feel about some of these themes and these lessons before showing it to them. I'm thinking for now, probably not. I'm going to wait a little bit, just because I know their personalities and I know their development and their situation for both my kids. And I'm going to keep watching and gauge that. I don't think it'll be too long before I will feel comfortable showing them Iron Man. Again, the themes I think are really good and helpful. And I think it's a lot of fun movie. And I want to show it to them. I'm just going to gauge kind of how they're feeling. So I guess right now the answer is no. I'm not going to let them watch it yet. But as a parent, I'm going to gauge their development and how they're feeling about some of these concepts before going into it. Okay, so that's my review and the lessons and what I feel like we are taught from Iron Man. Let me know if you agree, what you think about this as well. I mean, this is my experience. This is my opinion. But did you get the same thing out of Iron Man? And if you like this, Hit the like button below. Subscribe if you want to see more movies like this. And I'll talk to you next time.